Not yet. Shush. Hey, everybody, and welcome back to ZEISS Conversations. We're doing another live event today. We've got some interesting guests for you, too. We're going to talk about how you move from a DSLR camera format to a mirrorless format. A lot of people are looking to maybe lighten up their gear or have some questions about, what the differences are between the two and why you might pick one over the other. So, without further ado, let me bring on my guest this afternoon, wherever you might be in the United States. To my left is Tracy Page. She is a ZEISS camera ambassador. She's a Sony shooter. She's the topic of our conversation today, and coming from the Nikon format. And to my right is Gene Szucs, who is a Sony digital imaging trainer, and he's going to help walk us through some of the things that might help you. Uh, Make the transition a little more easy for yourself. So, without further ado, Gene and Tracy, welcome.
Hey,
Hey,
thanks for having me.
thanks.
Thanks. This is great.
And
I'm going to
Wilma the
introduce
Wonder Dog.
Wilma the Wonder Dog. Yes, and then she's going on the floor. So, bye, Wilma. I can't handle both Wilma and the camera at the same time. So
First things first, right?
that's
Yeah. So,
right.
Gene, you're new to our group here. So, tell us a little bit about yourself and your background, and why there's guitars in your on your desk there.
Great. Well, first things first. Yeah, my name is Gene. I'm actually in the New York City area. I've been I'd say probably a professional, a creative professional, probably for over 25 years. To that regard, I started shooting in sports production, mainly in the 90s and early 2000s. And then I shifted more over to the still realm and doing freelance editorial work. So I did a lot of music and a lot of editorial. And now I'm more of a portraiture type of guy. And I started actually my first main systems were also Nikon. So I came over from the Nikon world to the Sony world. I love just talking about mirrorless and being a part of everything that has to do with the mirrorless community here. And as wide as their guitars, there's only one right to the side of me, but I probably have about 12 to 14 probably in the back junked up. I used to moonlight as lead guitar player here in New York.
Oh,
And
nice.
right, yep. So I love music, and cameras kind of are my thing. I think if my wife, who probably hopefully will not be watching or listening to this, if she had her way, probably all this would probably be a little bit more gone and more of a guest bedroom rather than my studio. But certainly that's my therapy. But I love playing, and I love shooting, and I love photographing guitars. So, but yeah, it's funny. I think the more we've been doing about, I don't know, this will probably be about the seventh stream I've been doing in the past week and a half. And
Wow.
I try to augment. I'm like, I try to give every guitar I have like a spot somewhere. So it'd be a Stratocaster one day, it'd be a Les Paul another, and Tyler, one of the other boutique stuff. I love just showing a lot of them off because they never get enough attention. So I try to just make sure that I give them those. Tracy has dogs over there, and mine's I have guitars, so that's kind of like that's kind of what I do. But
Awesome.
I've been a trainer for Sony. I've been part of the creative team there. I mean the training team there for probably about 3.5, 4 years. So I've been it was a really wonderful shift coming from the world of DSLR into the mirrorless landscape. And I think that was the right time, because I think that's when Sony really started to shift to the forefront of just digital imaging in general. And so it was a great time. It's really been a great road. And obviously with the time we're in now, talking to you via a camera instead of face to face, which is what I normally like to do, that's more my comfort zone. It's now is a better time than ever to create and learn how to create better images. And hopefully, we're really lucky to have Tracy on board. I know we have a lovely, wonderful pro team that helps supports artists like this, that really kind of that helps. And we've got a wonderful team, and a wonderful roster of artists, and we're welcoming. Obviously, with the relationship with ZEISS, it's great to have.
Awesome, awesome. Glad to hear that. And and we love. I hear you. One of the things, the challenges that we've had is making sure that we can reach the audience and still have that same kind of conversation that we're used to having across the table or across the trade show here virtually, and still have the same conversation. Tracy, you've been a ZEISS ambassador for a short amount of time now, about a couple of years actually. Now that I think about it.
Yeah, I'm actually having my third anniversary in May, so
Awesome,
I
awesome.
know. I love it. It's been great. You guys have been phenomenal. Or now I say you guys, I'm part of the team now, so I feel like it's all of our family. And totally new to Sony. And I will shout out to the pro team. I've got this upside down. The Sony pro team, Amanda Eric has been really fantastic. I'm just diving in. So a really dear friend of mine, Ellis Wiener, who writes for Professional Photographer Magazine, got a hold of the Sony, I can never get all of this right, the Sony Alpha 7R Mark IV
Yeah.
did I get that right?
You got it. And it's amazing. When you introduce 6 to 8 cameras within 3 to 4 years, things can kind of start juggling around. So
Right.
yeah, sometimes for us, it's like, okay, where are we at today? Yeah.
Well, I mean, and I had, looked at Sony for a long time, but I've been shooting Nikon since high school. So it's just, it's so second nature for me. But Ellis got a hold of the Mark IV, and I had an Otis. Tony had sent me an Otis EF mount lens, and I've gotten a Sigma MC11 adapter. And so Ellis and I put the Otis onto the Mark IV, and all of a sudden it was like, bang, this is a different game. So here I am. I know absolutely nothing. I'm a babe in the woods, and Gene is going to kind of take us through some of this, because I'm starting from the very beginning. And somebody's emailing me about headshots. I'm sorry about the dinging. I'm starting from the very beginning. I don't even know how to get ISO onto the back of my camera or into my dials. I mean, I move ISO around more than anything else, and I don't see it here. So Gene is taking me from how to set up my camera. We're just going to keep going. And when we run out of time today, if we still have questions and things to talk about, we'll come back.
All right, great. No, and I think that's honestly, that's one of the greatest things that I loved about our systems. At the time that I started out shooting Sony, I was actually not just shifting from Nikon, but I used to use Leica quite a bit. And basically, I got married, and my wife is basically wearing my Leica M9 on her finger, the camera. But I still had these lenses, these wonderful lenses that I really wanted to use in another application and not just get rid of them. They meant a lot to me. So Sony had just started releasing their Sony A7 series at that time. The original RX1, which was a almost like a full frame 35 millimeter all-in-one camera, which is just an outstanding lens and processor combination. I still swear by that. I really wish Sony would give me one, but alas, they do not. It's very it's a high commodity. But I had these lenses, and at the time, Sony really had, I think they had 4 or 5 main lenses on the full frame line, one of which is still my desert island lens, is the ZEISS 55-1.8. So the Sony ZEISS, I love that lens. That's
Awesome.
Probably the one lens that if I were to have to go anywhere and just take one thing, I would love for it just to be that one. Obviously, with editorial work, you kind of have to sometimes shuffle with a 24-70 and 70-200, but I'm a prime guy at heart, and I love that lens. So I came in and I just started buying up every third-party lens I could. I was part of the Adorama the pro video team, and I had access to all these wonderful lenses that were 40 and 50 years old Nikon or AIS lenses, Canon FD lenses, Leica, I mean, everything, screw mount, M43, anything. I just tossed everything at the Sony I could. And, I would have time during the day, whether, with all these adapters around, where I could just mix and match and just do what I needed to do. And I've slowly just fell head over heels with it. And I think it brings up a good point on why people have slowly started migrating over from the bigger DSLRs over to the mirrorless system, and namely, hopefully, the Sony, because if you're a full frame shooter like I am, they are the premier things to go to, premier tools, I should say. But
right.
they go ahead. I'm sorry. Was anyone asking me a question?
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. I'm like, well, okay. See, you got me talking about it, and I just keep spurting off, shooting up like a rocket. But as time started going by, and Sony kind of brought me on board. I automatically, I mean, I would hear a lot of feedback as far as, well, they're too small, they don't look like professional cameras, yada 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 yada. Well, I mean, if you're a typical New York shooter who carries around 2 Nikons or Canons, whatever, slinging around everything on your side all day, and you're hauling Pelican cases through subways or buses and everything like that, I mean, it wears you down a little bit. So I certainly started to feel, after years and years of doing a lot of this stuff, as my knees and back started not feeling too happy with me. So after a amount of physical therapy, I kind of decided to kind of shift my pattern more towards the smaller body. And I love the lighter weight. And I mean, Tracy, I'm interested to hear about you. I mean, why you ultimately decided that you needed to go from a bigger system like an 800 series Nikon over to the Sony. But I mean, for me, that's kind of my reasoning for it, is definitely it's a less wear and tear. It's a lot more enjoyable to shoot. And then, of course, we're going to get into the viewfinder, which is, pretty much revolutionary. For what you see is what you get. So it puts a little bit more enjoyment for me. I definitely was getting a lot more keepers and a lot less, filler, as you'd say on the card. So, I mean,
I think that's a good question to ask. And I know, Tracy, you'd been shooting Nikon forever when you came over, and we talked about just the size of that the DSLR format, for a person who's got, you really need to put some oomph behind it. And then when you throw the Otis lens on the front of that, you get excellent quality imagery. But now you're really carrying around something heavy, and I can imagine what that does to your knees. I sorry about the physical therapy there.
No, yeah, no, it's between the Otis lens and the Nikon D850, I'm carrying like 7 pounds around.
Right.
And I work 8 to 10 hour days, and it gets heavy. I'm starting to get arthritis in my hands, my back, my knees, but I'm used to it too. So the weight has really not bothered me much, just because I am used to it. But what made me change was not the weight. It was the fact that when I'm an all manual shooter, I shoot everything manually, manual focus, of course, because I shoot Otis. But when I put the Otis on the Mark IV, I found the focus so fast with the focus peaking. It was like I was shooting automatic. I mean, it was just so instant. So what I did then is I shot a series of images, and it was my friend's, it was his camera that he was reviewing. So I didn't have access to the camera beyond that. So he had to send me the images back. But I really looked at the raw data and the JPEGs both, and made sure that the skin was holding up in editing and post, and it was beautiful. So at that point, it was kind of like, all right, this is the time to make a change, because this is a game changer for me. And it was just finding my focus was so fast. And I can find my focus relatively quickly with the Nikon because I'm used to it. And you can tell from the thickness of my glasses, I'm blind as a bat. So you can't use vision and age as a reason to not manually focus. But with the focus peaking, I spent what I just spent on the new camera. So that's your answer.
Gene, one of the questions that we often get on our side of the fence there is, a lot of times I hear concerns about moving to mirrorless. At least originally, people saw mirrorless as more of a pocket camera, and I think Sony really changed the impression on that. Do you find that people are a lot more comfortable with the high megapixel sensors in the R3, and then certainly in the R4? Do you find that helps the argument to make the switch?
It's interesting you say that, because I also came from the time when the Nikon D800 came out and kind of floored everyone, because you were never able to dive that deep into a pixel pool before.
Right.
So when people are jumping up from like a Nikon D700 as 12.2 megapixels to a 36 megapixel sensor, automatically they're like, oh my God, my images really aren't that great, because you can dive so far. And those of us that don't have the hands steady enough of a surgeon like me, I mean, I drink an absurd amount of coffee. So I am, I definitely need what we have that we came out with in our second generation mirrorless. Right now, we're in our fourth generation with the R4. But certainly the introduction of the image stabilizer, the 5-axis image stabilizer that this sensor rests on, I think certainly adds a little bit more of a confidence level. And just overall, like, yeah, I can handle this. I mean, running from not like, I mean, we can talk about like an A7R3, which is still, a healthy dose of megapixels up to about 41, and then going up to 62. I mean, it's you're treading dangerously close to medium format territory.
Right,
So,
right.
and a lot of people that shoot 35 millimeter don't typically do that. So, I mean, there is a, go big or go home type of mentality, but I think on all those cameras, but I mean, both are severe pro level cameras, but the fact that you do have that safety net of the dynamic range of 15 stops, the 5-axis image stabilizer, and 5.5, even on the R4, what the R4 offers. I mean, I think that the one thing that I wish we would have included with the purchase of maybe like say for an R4 would be an extra hard drive for your camera, for your computer, because the things just, I mean, if you've never seen a 120 megabyte raw file, I mean, it's pretty impressive. So for that alone, I think might skirt some people to say, okay, I can stick with an R3. But I mean, there are certainly things that, the improved viewfinder on the R4 for manual focusing lenses. I mean, you're going from 3.6 million dots to 5.76 million dots on the R4. So your eye, it's definitely looking a little bit more organic. I mean, you have a lot of the other companies that have now jumped on board on the full frame area and been like, okay, mirrorless really is the real deal. And instead of, for the past couple of years, kind of still trying to push that heavy body, they're now jumping in the game with their first and second generations, whereas we've already taken the time to pretty much go all the way up to fourth generation. So we've learned, we've had our growing pains in some areas, and like, okay, battery life, boom, let's push a different battery in there. I mean, so it's certainly it's an amazing animal. But yeah, you're right. I mean, certainly people looked at mirrorless cameras as being too small and pocket-like, and then you pull it out and then you see what you can get out of it. I mean, for the A7R4 by itself, I mean, and this is one of the sales points alone with that thing, is that it's not only probably the biggest full frame sensor camera out there, but it's also probably the biggest APS-C camera. I mean, if you crop this thing down to a Super 35, you're rocking out at 28 megapixels, with edge autofocus.
Yeah.
And with our enhanced eye autofocus and tracking, I mean, for those of you that do appreciate and love the glass that, that does have that autofocusing speed, like the Batis stuff. And then, of course, I mean, obviously our G Master and G Series and all our E lenses. I mean, if that's your game, then go for it. I mean, these cameras at the end of the day, they're as automatic as you want them to be. They're as manual as you want them to be. And I mean, I think for Tracy's application, it's all about setting up the way that is going to help her out.
Well, absolutely. And I do know that, Tony, you and I had this discussion before I purchased the camera, and I had it with Amanda Eric also about whether or not an A9 or the R series, the Mark IV, and the decision was, with a lot of input, since I was so new to Sony, was that I needed a camera that would take advantage of the lens I was shooting with. And the R4 was the one that really takes advantage of the dynamic range available in my ZEISS lenses.
Yeah, no, and I think that I was gonna lead you into that question is that I know that you kind of dipped your toe in when we first started talking. You didn't want to leave the comfort of the DSLR. And I don't think it was until the higher megapixel sensors that you actually even decided to give it a shot, for fear of losing that resolution that you were seeing. And that's key when you pair that with the R4's capability to resolve the image, and the high quality of the lenses like the Batis or the Otis. It's really almost a match made in heaven. I mean, when you put good quality glass on the front of those cameras, there's almost nothing you can't do.
And Tony, I know, has laughed at me over the last few years, because he, on one hand, he'll say, yeah, this is a really, you should look at this. And on the other hand, he goes, you do what you need to do. You do you. And there are a lot of conflicting messages. But finally, I think with when Ellis brought the Mark IV into the studio and we did that sample shot with my model Shay Davis, um, and then I had to look at the skin, and the skin wasn't falling apart, and it was, you know, the resolution, the range, the dynamic range was what I needed it to be. Then that was the game changer for me.
Awesome.
Yeah, the skin tone. I mean, I can't agree more. I mean, it's putting inferior glass on these cameras are like putting training wheels in a Ferrari. I mean, it's just not what it's meant to do. I mean, it can, but believe me, and I mean, it will take everything you throw at it in spades. But again, with certain glass lenses, like again, I'm going to refer back to my 55-1.8. I mean, the color renderings that I get off that, especially for skin, and I'm a strobe shooter, so like Tracy, and we both shoot a lot of pro photo. I mean, it's just heaven. So setting up my camera to that degree where I can just turn it on and I can just be ready to rock and lock and load for strobes is something that I don't take for granted on anything. And, you know, and I'm not going to discount the fact of the electronic viewfinder. I mean, I spend a lot less time. I mean, people ask me about metering all the time, and I do use a Sekonic meter. I love it, especially for strobes. But at the same time, you know, I find myself with these systems not really having to go that deep because of the latitude that I can get in my images, where I know that if I'm looking more for an action shot and I can understop, you know, I can underexpose this by 1.5, and I can still not get a lot of grain deep down in those blacks and the noise. I mean, and if that's what you need at the time that you're given, I mean, that's the way it goes. But again, I mean, there's so much flexibility within this system that, and almost, you know, I don't want to downplay a lot of the other systems out there because every single camera out there right now, I mean, anything that you pick up, I mean, if anyone is going, oh, I'm getting bad images, I mean, believe me, nowadays, it is not the images. I mean, it's user error. I mean, I think for us, we just tend to offer a lot so that for the demanding photographer, even the enthusiast and the hobbyist, I mean, it's going to be there for you to do. Sometimes it's a matter of working and setting it up a little bit, but at the end of the day, I mean, you can still plug and play in this camera and run it in program mode, and it's still going to give everything you could probably ever want. I mean, I'm at heart, I mean, look, I have 2 young kids running around downstairs right now. I mean, obviously you can't hear them. I have a directional lav on, but they're there, trust me. And I do not, I'm lazy. I cannot do a lot of work in post-production anymore. I mean, I had a gig earlier this year where I covered the U.S. women's national team. You know, one day coming back from the World Cup, I mean, I got the call at 4 a.m. Can you do it? And luckily, my Sony schedule allowed me to do that at the time. And I'd be out there, and then obviously I had to fire images off to Europe less than probably 25 minutes later. So I don't really have a lot of time to just go in and, oh, I got to tweak this and tweak that. I mean, it's got to go. And I mean, I think that's with everybody nowadays. It's instant gratification.
Just did the same thing with an editorial job for Oz magazine. I literally shot the images, drove home from Atlanta. It's 4 hours for me. Shot them in Atlanta, drove home from Atlanta, loaded them up to Oz. I didn't make the first edit, just sent them as they were, and they ran, and everything looks great. So that's just the world we live in. It is very instant. We don't have, you know, plus, you know, and this is something we're going to talk about, is it's really important to get it right in the camera, because when we're getting it right in the camera, we're not spending a lot of time doing post, and then we have time with our families. You know, just life goes on, and we're not spending it in front of our computers trying to fix our images. So
absolutely.
I think that is definitely the mark of a pro these days, is that we know how to get the images right in our camera. So I do want to talk about this, because when I shoot, so the way that I work is that I shoot pretty much at a set aperture and a set shutter speed. I'm shooting at 5.6, and I'm shooting at 1/160, because that's, you know, the slowest shutter speed I can handhold most of the time, and I don't use a tripod unless I'm doing a commercial job that requires it. So I need to know how to put the ISO, because that's the factor that I change the most often.
Yeah,
that's like the first question I have is, how do I set up this custom menu to make it work for me?
Great. Well, that's a great question. I mean, and one of the things that I think is very important that I think everyone should know in regards to the Sony system is that to never discount the function menu button, which is on the back of their camera. Now, off the charts, off the top of your head, I mean, the A7R4, if you do look on the back of your camera, you are going to see a lot of buttons. There are going to be a lot of dials, and then there's going to be a scroll wheel. Now, simply put, you can roll your ISO off just by hitting the right trigger off of your, you can see that right there, off of your rear dial. So if I can go in and I can hit my ISO and I can just trigger anything off. Normally when I'm doing and strobe settings, I just finished a video about this actually in regards to setting up for strobes, is that I'm always like, I want something that I can kick up. I get ISO 200, shutter speed 200 of a second, aperture 5.6, just so I can put on one of our settings called memory recall, which is a little bit further down the rabbit hole than I think we want to look at right now, because you're just looking at the ISO component. Now you can access the ISO either through the rear dial. So if you take a look at it, Tracy, it's gonna be on the rear. You can turn your camera on and you can click that right to the right, and you're gonna see the ISO and the numbers, and you can scroll through it and set it just like that through the wheel. And if that isn't hit your fancy, I'm going to go back to the function menu button, which is basically 12 fully customizable controls that you can go in and you can custom set however you see fit. Now, off the top in your camera, if you hit your function menu button there, Tracy, and everyone out there in YouTube world that wants to follow along, there you are going to be able to see ISO, and you're also going to be able to change it that way.
Right, and I can see it there, but on the Mark II that I had for a little bit, it was on the wheel below it.
Yep.
And that's not doing it for me now. So how do I get it there?
Let's do that. Do you want it there, or would you like it somewhere else? Because honestly, the way that I set my ISO, there's a C1 button right at the top, and I always change my ISO via that dial.
So right now that's set for color temp, which
Right.
I'm fine with, but that can be ISO too. I need color temp to also be somewhere in there.
Great.
So let's I'm gonna let you tell me how to set it where you think it should be. I just want to make sure that I can quickly access it, because that's what I do. I change it on the fly.
Sure. Well, if you have color temperature but C1, we can go in either to C2 or we can go right into the back dial. So that is default. Now your camera is factory default, correct? Or have you already tweaked it?
No, this is factory default. I haven't done anything. I have literally been waiting for this conversation with you.
Okay, great. Me too. We've talked like 4 or 5 times.
I know, right? But you keep saying that, because I'm brand spanking new, you won't have to correct bad habits. So I have tried to, I got my camera after the stay-at-home order, so I haven't done the first set of headshots with the camera yet. And I have literally been waiting for this conversation with you. So I have not changed anything.
Great. Well, I tell you what, hey, Tony, can you drop up? We're going to try this out, folks, because I don't know if we have tested this yet. Field tested it. So I took the liberty of uploading a few slides that we can look at there to kind of go through and one of them is setting up your function menu the way that you want it set. So Tony, can you roll it up to slide 40? I believe it is. That's showing up on mine. And if it isn't, I'm gonna make something up, but I'm gonna try and talk you through this. But it's showing you a little bit here as far as is gonna be a little bit better. But the short of it is you're basically gonna go into your menu setting. So you hit this nice little menu button up at the top here, right? So hit your menu.
Okay, I gotta turn my camera back on. Menu.
Okay,
all right.
There you go, menu. Yes.
So and I can't really see the slides because they're over here for me, so I'm just gonna listen to you.
Okay. Wow, there it is. Yay, yay, yay. Okay, so basically you are going to be able to assign up to 113 different menu settings on the ZEISS R4. And I'd like to give Hector, one of my team members, a little bit of a shout out. He retweaked a lot of our tips and tricks presentations, so I had to run in through there today and kind of grab what I could before this event, because we decided at the last second, okay, well, let's just try to throw some of these things in here. But if we go over on the menu, you're going to see that the camera 2 tab is highlighted, correct?
So it's not, but it is now. Yeah.
Sorry?
I got camera 2.
Yep. Okay. So if we go over to, let's see here, in custom operation. So basically custom keys are going to be set on, if you go over to page 9 on the A7R4.
Okay, I'm there.
Then do you see the top? It says custom keys.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, if you just hit your center button right there, you're going to get a few little pages of everything that you can kind of change on there, right? So if we go over to page 3, which is the top menu dial. So that's going to show you the buttons at the top. Now let's go ahead and click on number 2, okay?
Okay.
You got it? Okay, so we're
Mhm.
going to be going to scroll through some things here. So I'm going to go over here and I'm going to look for ISO. There's a lot of stuff in here. So ISO is on page 8. So it's the exposure one, okay? Got it?
No, I went right past it. I'm there now.
Okay.
Okay.
So if we go to page 8, if we go ahead and hit that center one, your C2 button is now going to be programmed to ISO.
Cool.
So as soon as you get out, hit that C2 button, then you're going to be able to scroll right through that. And I think that's a good illustration as far as how easy it is really to set up one of your buttons. I mean, obviously, you can change up every little button you want on here, but that's certainly one of the keys. In fact, I think some customers take a sweet joy at every demo I do that they will go through and they will reprogram every single button on my camera, because these are the cameras. Yes, they are Sony's cameras, but I do also use them on a day-to-day basis. So they will program ISO or something in every single button.
We
So
had my D850 out at the trade show. It was either imaging or PPE. It may have been both.
Right.
And people kept resetting my diopter. And
Yeah.
it's like I would pick up the camera and wouldn't be able to see anything. And it was because somebody had reset my diopter.
Yeah, it's
funny.
It's always fun to get the cameras back at the end of the day and have to reset everything.
Well, and you're talking, when you're demoing, probably 20 some cameras or something.
Mm-hmm.
It gets to be a little bit tricky and tedious, but at the same time, I can understand some people that's funny, which is why I always have, there are other dials at the top for your memory recall settings, which are 1, 2, and 3. So basically you can take a snapshot of all the settings in your camera and program to one of those numbers. And I always have like something just defaulted right there. So just off the top, if something pops up and I need it and I forget to default it, that I can change that number 1. I'll be like, okay, I'll be back to at least kind of like almost, just like safety lighting. It's kind of like, so it's my little parachute at the time, or my spare tire. So I can, and then I can go back and do what I need to on the back end after all that's said and done. But certainly that's one of the easiest things to do. But back to what I was saying, as far as the function menu goes, if you go in there, I think the comment that we get quite a bit is the intensity and just the length and just absolute size of our menus. And as you can see, I mean, if you can go in and I can assign each button up to 113 different things in my camera, and we're always adding features. It's important to know that you can escape a lot of that if you really need to, one or two ways. Obviously, Tracy, if you hit your menu button, again, you're going to see a star tab over at the side. You're going to be able to program anything that you see that you think you want in there. So if you're using a Batis and you really want to utilize some of that really wicked fast autofocus and autofocus tracking that our cameras are really known for right now, you can program focus settings in there. You can put in your focus magnifications so that if you're using your Otis, I mean, at the flick of a switch, you're going to be magnified 2 times in, so you can make sure that you fine tune your focus.
So tell me how to do that, because that's actually something that I would love to be able to do.
Excellent question. So what we're going to do again, what are we going to do? Okay, this is going to be your test here, Tracy. Okay, so after what we just said, after you go into that menu tab of camera number 2, and then you go into those custom keys, let's do the same thing. All right. Do you remember how to do that? Because it's
okay. So I was in the star menu, so I need to be back into camera 2.
Yeah, let's go back to camera 2 and where that slide was. So we're going to be on page 9 on the A7R4, and you're able to go.
I'm there.
Yep. And so you go into, actually, I just lost it now. So hold on. Okay. So we go into those custom keys. And then, so for example, I'm going to go pick a random one. So I'm going to go to, let's just try on the rear of the camera on rear button. So it's going to be the first page of that customization menu. Let's go down to number 4, which is on mine right now. It's under silent shooting. So basically what that does is it'll disengage the mechanical shutter and run straight to an electronical. So we go into silent. Yeah. So we go in ahead and hit that right there. So what we're going to do.
I'm lost to where you function menu
Sure.
set. Okay. I got, all right. I am on function menu set, and now I'm going into, okay.
Actually, no, hold it. That's not where we want to be. We want to go. So go back to your menu where that custom operation menu is.
Yes, I'm in custom operation menu 1.
Okay, at the top, you're going to see it says custom key.
Yes.
So let's go into there.
Okay.
And then
I'm there.
that first menu right there is going to show, it's going to be titled rear. So it's looking at the rear of your camera.
Right, correct.
So we're going to scroll down to number 4.
Okay, focus mode.
Yep. So we'll go ahead and we're going to change that up. All right.
Okay.
So excuse me. Let me just So I'm going back in here and I'm looking at my setup, all this other fun stuff. So if you go over to, let's just go over to my AF1 focus area, switch focus area, tracking on. I mean, you have a lot of different stuff going on here. So 1 second, focus hold. 1 second, let me go through here. Obviously someone went, so you go over to page 14. Whew, that took a while.
All right, I'm on page 14.
You see, says focus magnifier.
Yep.
Click on it.
Okay, so number 4 is now set for focus magnifier.
Yep. So if you go into, let's go, I'm going to go to my magnification and boom. So what you're going to be able to do with that is, as soon as you hit that button in your manual focus and you're doing manual focus, it is going to be able to, it's going to zoom in. You're going to have 2 types of zoom magnifications in there just to fine tune what type of focus you want to make sure that every corner or whatever is set the way that you see that you want it.
Okay, so that C3 button is now focus magnifier.
That is focus magnifier. Yes,
ma'am.
ma'am.
Oh, how very cool.
So let's take it further down the rabbit hole, okay? Let's go back to the custom menu and let's do one more just so that we can get this where we really want to here.
Okay.
So, let me go into, I don't want to throw you off, so I'm like, if she wants to change it sometime, I'm gonna do this. So let's go down. So we're gonna look at that rear side again, right? And we're gonna go down to number 5. So we had number 4 last time, which was the C3 button. Now we're gonna go down to number 5. All right.
Okay, so C4 is where the trash can is.
Yep, exactly.
Okay.
So we're gonna hit that, and then what we're gonna be doing is we're gonna do it with peaking. So when we get in there, let me see here, and I should probably have written this down beforehand just so I wouldn't have to scroll through these, but is there, okay.
What fun would that be?
I know, right? Like, well,
I know, right?
Okay.
What fun would it have been if we planned all of this?
Just go to 14, go over to page 14. It's under the focus assist. Right underneath focus magnifier, it's going to go peaking display select. And then you can turn your peaking on or off at that.
Oh, great. So that actually helps me a lot, because one of the things that I had trouble with the Mark II is that sometimes the peaking would jump in and I wouldn't be able to actually see what I was focusing on.
Right.
So now I can just, with the touch of a button, just turn that off so I can actually see my.
But you can also dial it in inside the camera or setting another, like the level you want. So if you want a low, mid, or high level of peaking, resolve, so that, depending on how dangerous you want to get. So that's just a quick
very
way
dangerous.
Right there.
I'm very dangerous, Gene.
I know you are, Tracy.
I know that's my middle name.
You Southern Belles down there. I know how it goes.
That's right. It's actually, it's usually trying to keep me out of danger. Everybody says I need a keeper. So.
Right. And obviously one thing you're also going to want to know, because I know that you love strobes, is that you're, remember, if you shoot strobes with this camera, one thing you want to do is obviously probably turn your live view settings display off, because when you're trying to shoot ambient light with in a darker room with just modeling lights at 200th of a second at 5.6 up to aperture f13 with ISO 200, obviously it's going to be pitch black. So You're going to want to go into your camera tab number 2 again on page 11 and turn off that setting. And that's also, you can also make a custom button for that as well.
All right. So I'm on camera tab number 2, and page 11 for me says audio signals.
Page 8.
Oh, okay. So page 8, live view display setting effect off.
Right. If you do a lot more strobes, but then again, you can have different scenarios. So like, for example, on my memory recall settings on the top, if you look at the top of your camera dial, let me see if I got, I should have done, Tony, is I should have uploaded this video I just did, but I did not. So give me 1 second. I'm going to see if there's an intuitive way that.
And the reason that we're talking about this out there in YouTube land is because when you do shoot a strobe, you're changing your shutter speed and your ISO to what is appropriate for what the light the strobe is going to get you. So if you're looking through your camera and you've got your live video on, then sometimes it will just show you black and you can't focus. So this is so that you can use the ambient light or the room light to see for focusing.
Correct. Yeah, absolutely. So, and you're dealing with a camera right now. It's got 567 phase detection points. I mean, and then and then your contrast area is just incredible. So it's just it's all that in a bag of chips inside of this camera. So it works. It's just you're maximizing everything you can with what you got there.
Don't say chips. I'm going to be craving Doritos again.
Right? I love Cheetos, and I can't find them at the grocery store around here right now. So I'm kind of hankering for that.
You can order them on Amazon, I think.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I ordered a big box of Doritos. So.
But you know how it is. When you want Cheetos and Doritos, you want them now. So.
Well, I told Gene last week he was doing a YouTube with Daniel Norton from Adorama.
Yeah.
And they went a little long. And I was like, I love you guys, but I need Doritos. So bye.
When you get good friends together, I mean, we've known each other a long time. Yeah. And it's honestly, that's the kind of way we play catch up. I think I said, I haven't really seen you in a while. Do you guys want to do a Chinese? Like, yeah, come to my channel. We'll catch up. So that's what we did.
Awesome.
So, like
yeah, I just wish I hadn't stayed with you for the whole journey.
We're all each other's reality shows here now, too.
That's right. The rabbit holes were pretty intense.
Right.
So what I'm kind of hearing in all that when we get when we work through the cheesy haze of the Doritos on the screen, the is really what the abilities of the Sony mirrorless, the A7 family, have really brought everything to the forefront. I know I'm waiting for Mr. Professor Hines to kind of chime in here, but really, a lot of what I'm hearing is not only is the autofocus just that much better, especially in the R4 or even the A9. To the point where it really kind of lends itself to doing almost an automation. But what we're just talking about now is the ability for someone who already has some glass to be able to put it onto the system and then modify very quickly to get them the ability that they were used to, whether it be manual focus or some other function of the glass that they're applying to the camera system.
Sure. Well, I mean, for myself, I mean, coming from the Nikon family, it was very, I mean, obviously their autofocusing system is very hard to re-engineer and reverse engineer for any type of system.
Right.
And so it took me, I'll be honest, it took me a while. It took me about 2 years just to totally dump everything. But at that point, I mean, we have over 58, we have lenses coming out everywhere. So it's been very difficult to kind of say, oh, well, I have to have any type of allegiance there to that area. I mean, with the ZEISS family, the G series, and then the G Master, but also the fact that it's not just the A7 series, it's the A6000 series too. So, I mean, we basically embraced the fact that we wanted a lens family that you could work on both systems. So you can take one of our full frame lenses, slap it on the A6000 series, which the A6000 is the best-selling mirrorless of all time. It's probably the only reason I'm sitting here talking to you, because of the way that camera has sold and still does sell. But that you can take those lenses and mount them even on a full-frame body and still shoot them fine in Super 35. I mean, I know people that exclusively do that. I mean, they want the really smaller glass, and by God, someone loves a 16-70 ZEISS f4. Built for the 6000. I mean, slap it right on there on the A7R4 or whatever. I have, even in back here, I use, I mean, this is my infrared. This is my original A7R that I own, that I had full spectrum infrared modded. And I take a lot of those lenses and I'll put them on there because they work really well on an infrared application. So, I mean, it's definitely, the sky's the limit. Obviously, there are thousands of ways to do the right thing in photography. I mean, that's the best thing about this, is there's no absolutes. So it's a matter of how you make it work and work for you. I mean, and that's, I think that's what even drew me out of going from being a reactionary photographer to, pre-visualizing a bit, wanting to create, all right, like Tracy does with her application. I mean, the stuff's stunning, working and showing the truth in other people, but, obviously getting to know the tools and what you can do with them, I mean, is masterful. And obviously, I mean, ZEISS has done a wonderful job with the Bata series. I mean, those lenses, I mean, are very popular.
Thanks. I appreciate that. And certainly I want to get back. Barrett had popped in there,
Hey,
and
Bear.
he kind of mentioned one of the things that really has worked incredibly well, and we're so appreciative of. But with ZEISS and Sony having a relationship that goes back 20 plus years, there certainly are a plethora of Sony and Sony ZEISS and ZEISS lenses for someone to choose. So you have all of that variability that you can bring your art to the camera. You can do the same in your lens choices as well. And that's just it gives you a really good sense of confidence in that platform to
Mhm.
really move to something that's a lot lighter and will still give you the quality that you're used to in your work and in your art.
Yeah, no, without a doubt, you couldn't said it better. Someone did have I want to get to this question that's on here before because I'm going to forget it. I'm going to forget it. Someone was asking about the ZEISS, Sony ZEISS 50-1.4 against the 55-1.8, and it's summed up pretty simply for me because I think that that 50 millimeter 1.4 as well as the 35-1.4 are probably the sharpest in that field that I've ever used. Now, as sharp as they are, they're definitely heavier than I normally do. I actually, one of our artisans that's come on board, he's a tremendous photographer, David Burnett. A few years ago, I was asked to go out and train him on one of our cameras, and that's one of the lenses he requested was the 50-1.4. And I took it out there, and that's still one of the. I mean, I took a portrait of him, a natural light portrait, in a coffee shop. I'll never forget this on 6th Avenue. I mean, it was on his card, and he sent it to me. He was like, "Gee, this is awesome! Like, I've never seen this on a 50 millimeter lens before." And it is. I think if I'm in the studio, and I think that the 50 and 35 are perfect for me. In the field, I think the 55 travels a little bit better for me. I mean, now if you're used to an Otis, then by all means, I think the 50-1.4 and the 35-1.4 are definitely going to pick your fancy. I think those are just those will be classic lenses.
Yeah,
They are just I have them in my kit. I love them. I just, the 55 just seems to travel with me a little more just because of size, and I can take like a 21-8G with me or the 35, even I still, but again, I still like the small 35-2.8 too. It hasn't seen the light of day too much lately since the 35-1.4, but I mean, that's like such a great walk around kit in New
right.
York. I mean,
I take my 40 Batis. I
Yeah.
mean that's what this is with the close focus. When I'm not shooting with the Otis, if I'm shooting for me out and around town or in groups, then this 40. I shot a whole golf tournament with this last year, and I
wow.
think I've been shooting this golf tournament for 9 or 10 years, and they thought they were the best images that they'd ever seen from me, so they were really really happy. And I shot the whole thing with a 40 on the Sony. It was actually the Mark II that I was using for that.
Yeah, it's funny. I think you're right, Gene. A lot of people, and I know myself as well. And you and all three of us have availability to just about any of the lenses, cameras. Sometimes
Yeah.
but yeah, you
I'm
find
limited to what you send me, Tony.
whatever you like. But you really kind of fall into one focal length, and that's really kind of the one that stays on your camera a lot. I know for me it's the 40 as well, and like I said previously, in a sea of photographers, I'm the marketing guy, so I don't shoot professionally, but what I found
We are
is
trying to train him up.
I think you say that. I think you say that, but then you go out, you leave here, and you get a full studio in the basement, and just kind of you don't want to be bothered with too many questions. You're like, yeah, I don't really shoot that much. And
if only. No, I have my camera. I actually using my A7S II with the Batis 25 as my studio camera right
let me
here.
tell you about that camera.
It's a fun one. I like it. It's
so many. I
simple.
mean, it's not just simple, but for 12.2 megapixels and the low
Yeah.
light sensitivity that range of camera offers, it also I think has some of the best film emulation just because of that sensor that any camera I've ever used has. So I mean, even if you're cooking ISO 51,200, I mean, it's like Tri-X film, man.
Yeah,
I mean,
no, it's really on the cine side we've done some productions where we're running with a red and CP3s, our compact primes, but for some reason the cinematographer needs to get the camera into a space like this small, and they'll just switch out, put the lens on the S2, and the quality at 4K is the same as what they're running in the Red Monstro, and they can match parity that way. You don't have to do anything in post. You don't have to do any edits. They can just go, they can switch and go. It's a really excellent camera, and it matches it's super well.
Yeah, well,
Well, and our marketing guy who just said that he's not a photographer just used the term match parity. So,
well, I know a few phrases. So
not only is he just a marketing guy, he's also Steven Spielberg's, whatever.
Yeah, so,
but that was actually one of my first jobs with Sony, going on tour of these cameras, the A7S2, was we would set it up at shows like NAB or Photo Plus, and we would have it in a pitch black room, and have objects in there, and then you just look through it and you're like, oh my god, your ISO's cranked 108 or 102,000. You're just like, this is insane that it can actually push that level of detail. And I think that goes back to what we want to talk about as far as color goes. I mean, these cameras can pretty much tweak whatever you want. I mean, obviously the A7R4 and a lot of the other cameras are built with picture profiles, especially for cine gammas, which may not, I mean, I don't know, Tracy, probably it wouldn't apply to your application as much as some of us that do a lot more intuitive video work. But the white balances alone, they can be tweaked any way you want it. So I can go into my, your color is automatically default. It's going to be in your function menu. But you can change it, whether if you go to your Sony Temperature and you don't like the way, if you think it's a little bit too neutral for you, you can just right click over on your dial there and you get a color chart that's going to basically be able to tweak it. So if you want a little bit more red, a little bit more green, something in there, something that if you, the pickiest of people will be able to go into and do it. I remember we had to sit down with, this was in 2016 or so, NBC, the Dateline team, because they had some Canon cameras and they wanted their A7 series cameras to grade well with them. So we had to go in and just create custom white balances for them. And it worked, we were able to do it. And it's, it's just a matter of just kind of knowing kind of how to get into it and just, oh, I need to right click here and boom, there you go.
Awesome.
So I actually, I shoot, I just dial in my Kelvin temperature.
Right.
But, I know I've been doing this long enough. I can generally look at my environment and tell what my Kelvin temperature needs to be to dial it in. But for those photographers that don't set their Kelvin temperature, let's talk about that a little bit. Tell us what the presets actually, how those are set, and then let's talk just for a moment about dialing in your Kelvin temperature.
Let's dial it in here. So you've got your fluorescent lights, your tungsten balance, your auto, your daylight. Cloudy obviously is a big fan of people. I think back from the Nikon days, a lot of people swore by cloudy just because it was a little bit more contrasty and dramatic.
Well, and it adds warmth.
Yeah.
And that's
warmth. Yeah.
Right. And which is something that I had to move away from, is because Nikon and Canon tend to add warmth in their lenses, and ZEISS tends to be a little bit color neutral or more color neutral. So I actually had to kind of retrain myself to realize that the color neutral was correct and not the warmth that I'm used to from my camera and lens.
Right. I mean, for us, it's very, very simple. I think, Tony, if you can drop in, I think it's slide number 9. It just kind of shows a little bit intuitive the process of how to go into your white balancing and tweak it a little bit. I mean, obviously, we have what's known as custom temperature filters. So it'll go in, so you can really scroll. You can do everything from, let's see, I'm dialing it in right now. Okay, So 9,900 down to the low 20s, as far as your Kelvin temperatures. So you have your Kelvin temperatures already set right in there for your parameters. So let's just say I want to go to 36 or 3700 K. I can go into my white balance. So if Tracy, if you hit your function key and you went down where it says probably AWB is in there, that'll be your white balance, and you click on that, that's going to give you a list of selections that you can just go in and you can dial up. And you have certain settings. So you have custom 1, custom 2, custom 3 down all the way at the bottom. And then you also have your C temperature filter where you can just dial in the cameras manually. So if you highlight that where it says K for Kelvin, you hit that right trigger over on the dial and you go over and you'll just be able to dial in whichever one you want. So there are situations, I mean, usually for my strobe setup, I have no issues going with a flash setting. I'm going to be honest, like I said before, I'm getting kind of lazy in my old age, but at the same time, certain areas where I do want to go change some things, and even for an infrared application or black and white. I mean, I'll go in there and I'll just go ahead and just change it up to where I want to like 2300 or 36. Do you see that all right? I mean, because it's pretty.
Yeah, no, I do. And Tony, did you say that there was a question in there that was relevant to this?
No, I didn't see one.
Oh, okay. I thought that we had a question. So yeah, no, I do see it. And absolutely. I tend to shoot between 4850 and 5600 and stay in that range.
Right.
And so far I haven't had to do any tweaking in there. It's been pretty accurate.
Good. But I mean, that's kind of like a shortcut if you want to go ahead and change it up. So it's a lot of fun. I mean, I think I love playing around with white balances. I think that's one of the most underrated things with these cameras, especially since if you shoot raw, I can just change it to whatever I want to.
Well, and I don't, which brings up, I know. So I think I just lost most of our audience here. They just, lost the idea that I'm actually professional. But I do shoot JPEG, and I shoot JPEG, which means that my white balance and my exposure have to be correct in camera because I'm not adjusting it later. But I do that for the file management and because my team is uploading and managing my files for me. And that way all of my decisions are made in the camera and I'm not having to rely on them to make any decisions. I've already made the decisions. Right. It's part of me being a control freak.
Well, remember, just because you do that, if you do want to do, I mean, you can have the option here because you got 2 card slots that you're working with in these cameras now, and they're both very fast. So you can roll those. I mean, UHS-2, they're very fast slots. So you can program one to be your JPEG and one to be your RAW if you ever want to do some comparing.
But that brings up another great question is a lot of my SDXC cards are not working on this well with this camera. So tell us, what kind of a card do I need to purchase in order to?
Obviously, yeah. Let me tell you. I mean, hold on a second. I've got like 40 of them lying around here, but I mean, I love these little Sony G series cards, but obviously the tough cards are because I have kids, not just kids, but I am a big kid at heart, so I think I have a tendency to that they're not as rugged. Most cards are just not as rugged for my behavior. So they will just fly out all over the place. But I mean, those you can run over with a truck or something, or they can submerge. I mean, throw water on them, and they tend to be very robust. But again,
so what's the read-write speed that we need to look for?
You want to be a faster card. So when you say that some of your cards aren't working, which ones are not?
Oh, a lot of my my Lexar and SanDisk, the Extreme Pros and the Platinum cards. So I guess they're not fast enough. So tell me what the read-write speeds are that I need to be looking for, because I know cards have changed. I mean, they've just changed so much, and we can buy so much more speed and memory than we could before. But
should have no problem working on here. I mean, I've been using. Let's see here. I'm going to just do a quick sample here on my R4 here because taken out, and I have an old 15 megabyte per second card, and I'm going to see if this thing will read correctly.
So
I would never recommend using this because if it works, it's going to take about 1.5 minutes for a raw image to rip out.
So in my camera right now, I've got the Extreme Plus by SanDisk, and it still takes a moment to show me the images. So I'm gathering that is my read-write speed that I'm having trouble with.
What is your read-write speed? And I just want to show everyone that my red light is on right here, which means it is still writing. And
okay, you guys are going to laugh at me. I have to change glasses
to write to this 16 gigabyte card.
I have to change glasses. So this is a 150 MB.
Wait a minute, 150 megabytes per second, right?
Right, per second.
Okay, well that should work fine, to be honest. So what happens when you put it in the camera?
Well, it records with no problem. It's the read. If I go back to look at an image, that is lagging a little bit. Now, this is much faster than the other cards that I've had. So I feel like this is. I think pretty good. I just wanted to see what you recommended.
Yeah, ideally, if you have a card that can read 300 megabytes per second, go to town. I mean, that's what I love to use. Maybe I'm a little bit spoiled that way, but again, I mean, I have cards that are I have wallets full of cards that are years old that I still get in here, and just depending on how fast of a drive I've got, that these things are going into is going to be dependent on the read and write speed or the upload speed. But again, I'm not as picky about that, but 300 megabytes per second is definitely on the top end of what I use.
Well, I mean,
But
I'm coming
120,
from.
I mean, 120, 98. I mean, I remember 98 megabytes per second. I mean, that's acceptable.
Well, I'm from the Nikon. I was using XQD cards, so
Yep.
and then before that, compact flash, and so my SanDisk cards or my
compact
my
flash.
I know, right? My SD card. Well, because I had an 800 D800 and then a D810 before I went to the D850. So my SD cards have always just been backup, and I've not depended on them. This is the first time that I've really depended on it. But I do really appreciate that this camera has 2 card slots.
Yeah, well, not just 2 card slots, but UHS 2 slots. So those are really, I mean, those are sending the data very, very fast. And I mean, I think that's a big benefit. That's, I mean, in contrast, and I'm not going to say in contrast because I think the A7R III also has a lot of, I mean, honestly, I love gigging that camera. I still love taking that out, but that has 1 UHS 2 slot and then 1 UHS 1 slot. So I always tend to make sure that I have a card in my faster slot because I will shoot raw files. I do. I admit it. I do shoot raw files. There are a number of professional photographers that don't need to shoot raw files, and I don't blame anyone. I mean, you've got such a large latitude even off the JPEG platform for any type of compression, but it certainly, I think that you have a number of many different combinations on reading and writing on how you can set up your drives. You know, it can make your head spin, but especially if that also leads into the video application. So, which is a whole other conversation, especially, you know, what you want to do reading and writing. And
so speaking of whole other conversations.
Yeah, well, that's true. But that's where card speed and everything really is going to come, I think, more into play than on the still image platform, especially if you're just shooting JPEGs, because the raw files being at 120 megabytes, I mean, that's certainly gonna be like, uh-oh. But again, I mean, you can keep shooting. Obviously, it's not gonna slow down your shooting speed, whatever. But I can see what you're saying by coming off board and everything like that, because those cards just weren't really built for that type of image architecture. So
right, and I am really having to change everything. I'm changing my workflow.
Yeah, right.
You know, there's so much involved with changing systems. So we have been going at this for an hour. So we are going to, speaking of all the other things we could talk about, we have a lot we could continue to talk about. I sent Gene some initial questions, and I think we've gotten to like 3 of them. So we want to continue having these conversations. Gene, if you're willing to do it, sure. We would like to do this again. And
absolutely.
Everybody, please reach out to Tony and Gene and I. Let us know what you want us to talk about, if there are things we didn't cover today. In the chat box, you can Instagram me at Tracy Bosworth Page, at ZEISS Lenses Americas or Camera Lenses Americas on Instagram. And then, of course, Gene, you want to tell us how to reach you and send you for questions.
Thanks. And thanks for everyone for having me, especially, you know, letting us take an hour out of your time away from Netflix and whatever. So thank you for like.
Oh my gosh.
My Instagram is Gene, GENE _ Everett. So please follow me. I need a lot more followers. I really do.
Me too. Everybody. I'm like desperate for followers these days. I've never cared before.
I'm just gonna be sitting out in the street one day. It's like, we'll take photos for followers. You know?
Hey, that might work. I'm gonna have to try that one a little later.
All of us.
But right. Yeah, but you can also SZUCS is my last name. You can find me on Facebook. But Everett, Gene _ Everett. I try to make it simple. Just EVERETT on Instagram.
And Gene is also, while he is the pro trainer from Sony, and I just I appreciate him so much right now, because I don't know if I would be willing to take this whole journey without having people like Gene in my life. But he is also an amazing photographer, and I think GeneEverett.com is his website. And the guy goes and photographs things at Madison Square Gardens, and he does sports and concerts, and I love his imagery, bright, vibrant colors, and yeah, I know. It's just, I'm giving you a plug because I absolutely adore you.
No, here, go put on, Tony, put on slide 4, please. You can see that's my quarantine stuff.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we'll do that real quick.
Okay.
No, actually, I want to clarify something. My main support is more on the retail side. I think I teach a lot I'm a trainer for Adorama and everything like that. The Sony Pro team does mainly handle a lot of the operational end stuff in the sports, and like your main.
You're my pro. So
Amanda, those guys are great. Van.
I do love Amanda. She did like a whole hour with me in the fall.
I kind of, but you'll see me like normally I'm at Adorama or one of those guys up here, and just kind of, but things like this, I love doing things like this, and I love sharing work, and I love basically talking to photographers too. But those are my kids, so that's kind of things that I've been busy with. So but that's basically my quarantine stuff.
Well, Gene, I know that I met you and Bear in January, and it was like instant friends. So I just absolutely adore both of you.
Yeah, thank you. And Jeff Van Scoik from Car. He's
Jeff was there, and Amanda didn't get to go with us in January, but I already adore Amanda, so she's got me covered.
But yeah, if you want to check out absolutely people, the professionals that are interested in learning a little bit more and everything like that, you can definitely check out Sony Pro Support, because our Pro Support team is there to help you navigate, especially kind of what you're doing here. And I feel very thankful I've been able to kind of help out a little bit. So those guys are great.
Awesome. And then on the ZEISS side, again, Tracy Page, I'm a ZEISS ambassador. I'm happy to answer whatever questions, and there are 6 or 7 of us. We're all happy to address questions, and Tony is fantastic. So I think you are, but I think we're always here to, Tony is available through ZEISS Camera Lenses Americas on YouTube and on Facebook and Instagram, and ZEISS Lenses Americas on YouTube, and reach out to any of those addresses and you'll get him, and we will all try to answer whatever you've got.
Well, thanks, Tracy. I appreciate that those not kind words. Thanks to you, Tracy, for being part of this, and Gene, thanks so much for coming on board with us.
Thanks a lot for having me. I really appreciate it. And also for any other Sony, alphauniverse.com. So please check us out there.
Absolutely.
And we will see you again next time we do this.
And Tony, I look forward to meeting you up for one of the microbreweries up there in Orange County. So we can hang out.
Guys, you're going to do it without me, aren't you?
No. Maybe.
Well, thanks again, everybody, and to everybody that hung in with us. I appreciate you hanging in there. Lots of great information today. Like Tracy said, and we're going to invite Gene back. We're going to do this again. So if you have some specific conversational topics, whether it be towards lenses or imaging or camera systems, make sure to let us know in one of those channels, to Gene or to Tracy or to myself, and we'll get back to you. Thanks again, everybody, and we'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye.
Great. Thanks, guys.